Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. The Historical Blueprint of a Great Argead Saga, ALEXEIN. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Makāula Nakae. Audio Essay. Episode 15, The Macedonian Basileus, Unchecked Autocracy. Welcome back to Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. I am Makāula Nakae. When we dissect the political structures of the ancient Mediterranean, we must banish the comfortable, democratic ideals of southern Greece from our minds. To cross the borders into the mountainous north is to enter a world governed by an entirely different tier of power. The title Basileus, meaning king, carried an absolute, near-totalitarian weight within the house of the Argeads. Unlike its fractured, checked, or largely ceremonial counterparts in the southern city-states, the Macedonian Basileus was an all-encompassing apex predator. He was the supreme military commander, the central political executive, and the absolute religious high priest wrapped into a single unchecked individual. This immense concentration of autocratic power, pioneered by the grid of King Amyntas III and weaponized by his brilliant son Philip II, was the definitive engine that dragged Macedonia out of obscurity to dictate terms to the entire classical world. The Anatomy of Unchecked Sovereignty. To understand why the Argead war machine moved with such terrifying velocity, we must map how uniquely centralized its governance truly was. Look at the political models across the Aegean. In democratic Athens, the term Basileus had been completely stripped of its political teeth, reduced to a minor elected magistrate handling localized religious court cases. Authority was intentionally scattered across volatile assemblies, councils like the bull, and popular courts. In Sparta, while a dual monarchy existed, the kings were perpetually shackled by the hyper-conservative oversight of the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, and the supreme legal authority of the five ephors. A Spartan king who overstepped could be tried, fined, exiled, or executed by his own state. Macedonia recognized no such limitations. The Basileus stood completely alone at the summit of the hierarchy. There was no institutionalized parliament, no sovereign supreme court, and no formal democratic assembly capable of vetoing his ink. If the king desired a war, the army was mobilized. If the king dictated an administrative reform, the borders shifted. If the king pronounced a religious sacrifice, the altars ran red. While a traditional assembly of soldiers, the ecclesia, existed, its role was primarily to acclaim a new king or act as a high court in cases of high treason. It was never a legislative check on the king's day-to-day choices. This absolute concentration of power permitted immediate, lightning-fast strategic decision, making an unmatched executive advantage that caught the slow, gridlocked democracies of the South entirely off guard. Amyntas III and the architecture of consolidation. This iron absolute was not built overnight. King Amyntas III, who governed from roughly $393 text to 370 text BCE, inherited a kingdom that was a fractured, bleeding mess. Macedonia was being torn apart from within by treacherous baronial rebellions and slaughtered from without by brutal Illyrian invasions. The early historical record of his court is naturally hazy and fragmented, but his concrete political survival tells us everything we need to know. Amyntas realized that the only path to survival was the systematic, continuous centralization of authority into the hands of the crown. He focused his long reign on building a more formal, reliable administrative nexus, securing international alliances through calculated trade treaties and locking down personal control over the regional tribal levies. He laid the grim, indispensable groundwork of domestic stability, forging the structural cradle that would eventually sustain his youngest son's global ambitions. Philip II and the absolute hegemony. When Philip II seized the regency in 359 BCE, the frontier was once again on the brink of total collapse. He did not merely continue his father's centralization, he accelerated it with the cold calculus of a grand strategist. Philip completely re-engineered the office of the Basileus, removing any lingering internal checks from the lowland nobility. He established absolute personal custody over the military, professionalizing the phalanx and ensuring that every single soldier's salary came directly from the royal treasury. He bypassed the traditional authority of regional barons by creating the pis heteroi, the foot companions, drawing men from all over Macedonia to serve the king directly. His administrative reforms created an incredibly efficient system of governance that reported directly to his private chambers. By manipulating the deep political fractures of the southern city-states and forcing them into absolute economic and military reliance on his crown, Philip ensured that his domestic authority was completely mirrored by his international supremacy. He transformed the Basileus from a vulnerable northern monarch into the undisputed hegemon of the Hellenic world. The Heraclean pedigree, fabricating divine right. This absolute concentration of worldly power required a matching, unassailable foundation of cosmic legitimacy. The Argead royal family did not simply claim to rule by right of the spear. They claimed an explicit biological descent from the ultimate legendary demigod Heracles. They strategically, aggressively wove this ancestral lineage into every public display, religious ceremony, and diplomatic correspondence to elevate their authority far above the human laws of their subjects. Claiming descent through Carinus, the legendary founder of the dynasty, who traced his blood back to Temenus of Argos, a direct descendant of Heracles, the Argeads argued that the divine spark of Zeus flowed directly through their veins. This carefully managed genealogical lineage granted the Macedonian monarchy a powerful source of divine legitimacy that completely set them apart from the conventional rulers of the Greek South. Their autocracy was not a human invention. It was a divinely approved mandate. To rebel against the Basileus was to directly challenge the cosmic order established by Heracles himself. The theater of devotion, ritual is statecraft. The royal house's worship of Heracles was never confined to private chambers or quiet acts of piety. It was a massive, carefully orchestrated spectacle of public theater designed to reinforce the king's supreme authority in front of the baronial houses and the common populace. 1. Sculptural and visual propaganda. Monumental statues, bronze reliefs, and highly elite artistic representations of Heracles, always depicted alongside the features of the reigning royal family, were prominently erected throughout the palaces, public plazas, and strategic fortresses of the kingdom. The king's profile was stamped onto the realm's silver and gold coinage, meaning that every economic transaction within the empire served as a visual reminder of the Argead divine right. 2. Liturgical games and festivals. The crown heavily funded grand religious festivals and athletic competitions entirely dedicated to the memory of Heracles' labors. These events were massive civic tools. They allowed the royal family to publicly display their physical prowess, reinforce their high-blooded purity, and bind the hearts of the common conscripts to the crown through shared high-energy spiritual rituals. 3. The chief priest at the altar. During critical state emergencies, the mobilization of armies, or the signing of international treaties, the Basileus stepped forward in his capacity as supreme high priest. He led massive processions of the royal guard, personally slaughtering great bulls at the altar to demand the favor of his demigod ancestor. Oaths of absolute military loyalty were sworn directly upon the name of Heracles, locking the soldiers into a binding religious and political contract with the ruling dynasty. The identity of the North. Ultimately, the Macedonian Basileus represented a unique, completely distinct form of kingship in the ancient world. The unchecked concentration of raw power, forged in the fires of Amyntas's survival and perfected by Philip's tactical genius, completely separated Macedon from the fragmented political experiments of its contemporaries. By blending absolute executive command with a brilliantly marketed Heraclean divine right, the Argead house constructed an unassailable image of sovereign authority. They crafted an empire where the king's word was law, the king's sword was absolute, and the king's blood was divine, clearing a flawless, bloody path for Alexander III to step off his father's throne and conquer the known world. In ALEXEIN, we do not soften this autocracy. We step straight into the heavy, gold-rimmed reality of a throne that recognized no master but its own will. Tune in for our next daily drop tomorrow as we continue to dissect the bloodlines of antiquity. ALEXEIN, a great Argead saga. Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. Unearth the ultimate historical drama. We are releasing a brand new episode every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused, 5 to 15-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, the perfect daily plunge into the ancient world. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Subscribe to follow the rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below. Was the absolute concentration of power under the Macedonian Basileus a primitive regression back toward outdated Bronze Age tyrannies? Or was it the ultimate, most streamlined evolution of ancient grand strategy? Let me know your breakdowns in the comments below.